The story of the Prometheus Rising was told in every corner of the galaxy. Parents whispered it to children. Admirals used it to teach cadets about the dangers of underestimating an enemy. For 300 years, the tale had grown from history into legend, and from legend into something like a ghost story. The ship had been humanity's greatest weapon during the Unification Wars. Back then, humans were not the peaceful traders and quiet diplomats the galaxy knew today. They were desperate survivors fighting against extinction. The Prometheus Rising was built during those dark years. It was massive, powerful, and filled with technology that even its creators did not fully understand. The ship won battle after battle, turning the tide of the war. Then came the Battle of the Hollow Nebula. The enemy had gathered their largest fleet to destroy humanity once and for all. The Prometheus Rising led the human defense. The battle lasted for 3 days. On the final day, the great ship charged directly into the heart of the enemy formation. There was a flash of light so bright it blinded sensors across the system. When the light faded, the enemy fleet was scattered and broken. But the Prometheus Rising was gone. No wreckage. No escape pods. No distress signal. The ship had simply vanished, taking its entire crew with it. Humanity won the war, but they never found their legendary ship. Search parties looked for decades. They found nothing. Eventually, people stopped looking. The Prometheus Rising became a story, a symbol of sacrifice, and finally, a myth that most species believed was exaggerated. Ambassador Kethra of the Venari Dominion certainly believed the stories were exaggerated. He had studied humans for most of his career. They were soft now, he thought, comfortable. The fire that had once made them dangerous had burned out long ago. They posed no threat to the Dominion's expansion. That was why the third fleet had been sent to the colony world of New Antioch. The planet sat on vast deposits of rare minerals that the Dominion needed. Unfortunately, 12 million humans lived there. The Dominion's solution was simple. They would remove the humans permanently. Admiral Vornok commanded the Third Fleet from his flagship, the Dominant Will. He was a veteran of many campaigns and had never lost a battle. As his fleet entered orbit around New Antioch, he felt nothing but confidence. The colony had no military presence, no defense platforms, no warships. The humans below were farmers, miners, and families. They would die easily. The Admiral opened a channel to the planet. His message was brief and cold. The humans had 1 hour to surrender. If they did, they would be relocated to labor camps. If they did not, the fleet would begin orbital bombardment. Either way, the planet would belong to the Dominion. On New Antioch, panic spread through the cities. People ran through the streets, trying to reach shelters that would not protect them from orbital strikes. Mothers held their children close. Fathers stared at the sky with helpless anger. They had no weapons capable of fighting a fleet. They had no ships fast enough to escape. All they could do was wait and hope for a miracle. The minutes passed slowly. 50 minutes. 55 minutes. 58 minutes. Admiral Voronic watched the countdown with satisfaction. The humans had not surrendered. He would enjoy destroying them. His finger hovered over the command that would begin the bombardment. Then his sensor. Officer screamed. A fold space rupture tore open directly between the Third Fleet and the planet. The energy readings were impossible. No ship could create a rupture that large, that close to a gravity well. It should have torn any vessel apart, but something came through anyway. The ship that emerged was old. Its hull was scarred with the marks of ancient battles. Its design was unlike anything the Venari had ever encountered. It was massive, nearly twice the size of the Dominant Will, and it radiated power that made the Admiral's instruments flicker and fail. For a long moment, no one in the Third Fleet moved. They simply stared at the impossible vessel that had appeared before them. Then the ship broadcast a message. The voice was human, female, and completely calm. "This is Captain Alara Vance of the Terran Dreadnought, Prometheus Rising. You have threatened a human world with extinction. You have 2 minutes to withdraw your fleet. There will not be a third warning." Admiral Voronok felt his blood turn cold. The Prometheus Rising. It could not be. The ship had been destroyed 300 years ago. Everyone knew that. Everyone believed that. But the vessel floating before him looked very real and very dangerous. The Admiral's officers looked to him for orders. He saw fear in their eyes. Fear of a ghost story come to life. He could not allow that fear to spread. "Target that ship," he commanded. "All weapons. Fire." The Third Fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, energy lances. Hundreds of weapons fired simultaneously, filling the void with deadly light. The barrage would have destroyed any ship in the Dominion's navy 10 times over. The Prometheus Rising did not move. It did not evade. It simply sat there as the weapons struck its shields, and nothing happened. The shields absorbed every shot. They did not flicker. They did not weaken. The ancient ship took the full fury of the Third Fleet and shrugged it off like rain against a mountain. Then the Prometheus Rising began to move. It did not move like a ship. Ships were slow, predictable, bound by physics and mass. This vessel moved like a living thing, like a predator that had finally decided to hunt. It accelerated toward the fleet with speed that should have been impossible for something so large. The first destroyer died in seconds. A single beam of energy cut through its shields like they were not there, striking its engine core with surgical precision. The ship went dark, drifting helplessly in space. Then the second destroyer fell. Then the third. Admiral Voronok watched in horror as his fleet came apart. The Prometheus Rising was not just defeating his ships, it was playing with them. It struck only engines and weapons, leaving life support intact. It was not trying to kill his crews. It was sending a message. On New Antioch, the people who had been running for their lives stopped and looked up. Their instruments showed them what was happening in orbit. A ship from their oldest legends had returned to save them. Some of them wept. Some of them cheered. Some simply fell to their knees and stared at the sky in disbelief. The ghost of humanity's past had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Voronok had never believed in ghosts. He had built his career on logic, strategy, and overwhelming force. Superstition was for primitive species who feared the dark. The Venari had conquered that fear long ago. But as he watched the Prometheus Rising tear through his fleet, he felt something he had not experienced in decades. He felt true fear. The ancient ship moved through his formation like smoke through fingers. Every time his gunners locked onto it, the vessel was already somewhere else. Every time a captain tried to coordinate an attack, their communications dissolved into static. The ship was not just fighting them. It was thinking faster than them. 11 minutes after the battle began, 3 of his destroyers were disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. Their engines were dead. Their weapons were slagged, but their life support systems still functioned. The crews inside were alive and helpless. This detail frightened Voronok more than anything else. An enemy that killed without mercy was something he understood. An enemy that chose not to kill was something far more terrifying. It meant they were confident enough to show restraint. It meant they wanted witnesses. He ordered a retreat. His remaining ships turned and ran for the edge of the system where they could jump to fold space. The Prometheus Rising did not pursue. It simply hung in space above New Antioch, watching them flee like animals running from a fire. Across the galaxy, intelligence networks exploded with activity. Every species with spy satellites and listening posts had detected the battle. The energy signatures were unmistakable. Someone was operating a ship that matched the specifications of the legendary Prometheus Rising. Impossible, the analyst said. The ship was destroyed centuries ago. This must be a replica, a trick. A weapon humanity had been hiding. But the more they studied the sensor data, the more confused they became. The ship's technology did not match anything in modern human arsenals. It was old. Genuinely old. The hull composition, the shield frequencies, the weapon signatures. Everything dated back to the Unification Wars. Somehow, the original Prometheus Rising had returned. The question that burned in every intelligence briefing was simple. Who was controlling it? Deep scans revealed a crew of 47 humans aboard the vessel. 47 people operating a ship designed for a crew of 3,000. The Dominion's best hackers tried to access human databases to identify them. They found nothing. No records. No birth certificates. No military service files. These people did not exist in any modern registry. They were ghosts crewing a ghost ship on the bridge of the Prometheus Rising. Captain Alara Vance stood before a viewport and watched the planet below. New Antioch looked so peaceful from up here. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting across the surface. 12 million people lived down there. 12 million people who had almost died today. She was tired. Not physically tired. Her body was still strong, still young by most measures. But her soul felt ancient. She had seen too much, lost too much, carried too many memories of a war that the galaxy had forgotten. Her first officer, Commander Marcus Cole, approached her quietly. He was a large man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from battles fought long ago. Like everyone else on this ship, he had been born in an era of blood and fire. "The fleet has retreated," he reported. "No pursuit?" "No pursuit," Vance confirmed. "We've made our point." For now, Cole nodded slowly. He looked out the viewport at the stars, the same stars they had seen 300 years ago, before the jump that changed everything. "Do you think they understand?" he asked. "The people down there. Do they understand what we are?" Vance considered the question. What were they? Survivors of a temporal accident. Soldiers from a dead war. Living relics who had woken up to find everything they knew was gone, 300 years ago. The Prometheus Rising had made a desperate jump during the Battle of the Hollow Nebula. The ship's experimental drive had malfunctioned, trapping them in a fold between normal space and something else. Something outside of time. To the crew, only weeks had passed. They had drifted in that strange void, working frantically to repair their systems. When they finally broke free, they expected to find the battle still raging. Instead, they found silence. The war was over. Centuries over. Humanity had won, rebuilt, and transformed into something unrecognizable. The crew had watched from the shadows at first, gathering information, trying to understand this new galaxy. They learned that humans were now peaceful, diplomatic, soft. Some of the alien species whispered. The warriors of old had become merchants and scholars. Part of Vance was proud of her descendants. They had built a civilization without constant war. They had chosen peace when they could have chosen conquest. That took a different kind of strength, but another part of her grieved. The galaxy had not chosen peace. It had simply been waiting for an opportunity. Species like the Venari saw human kindness as weakness. They circled like predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. New Antioch would have been that moment. 12 million people slaughtered to send a message, and no one would have stopped it. No one except the ghosts of humanity's past will come for us, Cole said quietly. The Dominion. Maybe others. They'll want to destroy us or capture us. We're too dangerous to ignore. Vance smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. Good, she said. Let them come. Let them learn. She turned away from the viewport and walked toward the command chair. Her chair. She had sat in it during the worst battles of the Unification Wars. She had made impossible decisions from that seat. She had watched friends die and enemies burn. She had thought those days were behind her. She had been wrong. Send a message to the colony, she ordered. Tell them they're safe. Tell them the Prometheus Rising has returned. The communications officer nodded and transmitted the message. Down on the planet, millions of people heard those words. Some of them cried. Some of them cheered. Some of them began searching old history files to learn about the ship that had saved them. They found stories of desperate battles and impossible victories. They found records of a crew that had sacrificed everything for humanity's survival. They found the faces of men and women who had died 300 years ago. Faces that now looked down from orbit. It's very much alive. The legend had returned. And it had brought something the galaxy had forgotten. It had brought humanity's fire, the Galactic. Concord had not seen such chaos in centuries. 7 species sent their ambassadors to an emergency session. The Great Chamber, usually a place of careful diplomacy and quiet negotiation, echoed with shouting voices and accusations. The topic was simple. Humanity had a weapon they had hidden for 300 years, a weapon that had just humiliated the Venari Dominion's Third Fleet. Ambassador Kethra stood at the center of the chamber, scales flushed dark with anger. He had spent his career studying humans. He had written reports assuring the Dominion that humanity posed no threat. He had been wrong, and that mistake might cost him everything. "This is an act of war," he declared. "The humans have violated 17 treaties. They have hidden military technology from the Concord. They have attacked Dominion vessels without provocation." A murmur of agreement came from several delegations. The Kethmer, a species known for their aggressive expansion, nodded enthusiastically. They had always viewed humans as potential prey. This revelation changed nothing about their intentions. If anything, it made them more eager to strike first. The Surashi ambassador sat in troubled silence. Her people had been humanity's oldest allies in the Concord. They had shared technology, traded goods, and built diplomatic bonds that spanned generations. She had believed she understood humans. She was beginning to realize she had only understood the mask they chose to wear. The chamber fell silent as Earth's representative rose to speak. Ambassador Chen was a small woman with gray hair and gentle features. She had spent 40 years advocating for peace. Her voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber. "The Prometheus Rising does not belong to the Terran Republic," she began. "We have no authority over Captain Vance or her crew. They are remnants of an era we chose to leave behind. You expect us to believe that?" Kethra interrupted. "You expect us to accept that you cannot control your own ship?" Ambassador Chen met his gaze without flinching. Something in her eyes made the Venari ambassador take a step back. It was not anger. It was something older. Something colder. "I said we have no authority over them," she replied calmly. "I did not say we cannot control them. We are choosing not to." The chamber erupted in outrage. Species shouted at each other across the floor. Some demanded immediate sanctions against Earth. Others called for a preemptive military strike. The Kethmer ambassador openly suggested that humanity should be contained before they became a greater threat. Ambassador Chen waited for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice had not changed. Still soft. Still calm. Still carrying that hint of ice beneath the surface. "Let me be clear about what happened at New Antioch," she said. "Your allies sent a fleet to murder 12 million civilians. Farmers, children, families who had done nothing except live on a world someone else wanted. The Prometheus Rising stopped that massacre. If that is what you call an act of war, then I suggest you examine your definition carefully." "The Dominion has the right to," Kethra began. "The Dominion has no rights over human lives," Chen cut him off. Her voice was still soft, but now it carried an edge that made several ambassadors lean back in their seats. "None of you do. We learned that lesson 300 years ago. We learned it in blood and fire and the deaths of billions. We chose to become peaceful because we saw where the other path led. But do not mistake our choice for weakness. Do not mistake our kindness for inability." She paused, letting her words settle over the chamber. "The Prometheus Rising is a reminder of what we were, a reminder of what we can become again if we are pushed. We do not want war. We have never wanted war, but we will not watch our people die to satisfy someone else's greed." The Surashi ambassador finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost sad. "How long have you hidden this from us? We thought we were allies. We thought we knew you." Chen turned to face her old friend. There was genuine regret in her expression. "We hid nothing," she said. "The Prometheus Rising was lost. Truly lost. Its return surprised us as much as anyone. But I will not apologize for its existence. I will not apologize for weapons we've built when every species in this galaxy wanted us extinct. We survived. That is not a crime. The emergency session continued for hours, but nothing was resolved. The Venari demanded justice. Earth refused to condemn the Prometheus Rising. The other species watched nervously, calculating their own positions. That night, while the diplomats argued, something happened that changed every calculation. The Prometheus Rising appeared in orbit above the Venari homeworld. It arrived without warning. Emerging from fold space like a nightmare-given form, planetary defense systems activated immediately. Thousands of weapons locked onto the ancient vessel. Military commanders screamed orders. Civilian populations looked up at their sky and saw death. Hanging above them, the ship did nothing. It simply sat there in orbit, visible to every sensor on the planet. It transmitted no threats. It fired no weapons. It made no demands. For 6 hours, the Prometheus Rising hung motionless above the Venari capital. 6 hours of absolute terror for a species that had planned genocide without a second thought. 6 hours of understanding exactly how the humans on New Antioch had felt. Then the ship vanished back into fold space, disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. No one died. No shots were fired, but the message was received clearly across the galaxy. Humanity remembered how to be terrifying, and they wanted everyone to know it. The Venari Dominion withdrew their expansion plans into human territory the next day. Other species quietly did the same. The Concord's emergency session adjourned without any resolution against Earth. Ambassador Chen returned to her quarters and poured herself a drink. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She had known about the Prometheus Rising's plan. She had approved it. The peaceful diplomat had authorized a show of force that would reshape galactic politics for generations. She did not regret it. She only wondered what came next. On the bridge of the Prometheus Rising, Captain Vance watched the stars and waited. The galaxy was awake now. The legend had become real, and the hunt would begin soon. She was counting on it. The Galactic Concord made their decision 3 weeks after the incident above the Venari homeworld. They would hunt the Prometheus Rising. They would capture it or destroy it. They would show the galaxy that no single ship, no matter how legendary, could defy the combined might of 5 species. 200 warships gathered at the edge of neutral space. They came from the Venari Dominion, the Kethmer Empire, and 3 other species who feared what humanity might become. Each ship was crewed by veterans. Each captain had orders to show no mercy. Admiral Voronok commanded the task force from his new flagship, the Eternal Fury. He had demanded this assignment. The Prometheus Rising had humiliated him at New Antioch. He would have his revenge or die trying. The hunt lasted 3 months. The task force tracked the ancient ship across dozens of systems. They followed energy signatures and fold space trails. They interviewed witnesses and analyzed debris. Slowly, methodically, they closed in on their prey. But every engagement ended the same way. The Prometheus Rising would appear, strike with impossible precision, and vanish before the fleet could respond. Each battle taught the hunters a new lesson about just how outmatched they truly were. The ship's weapons were devastating, but they were not the real threat. The real threat was its mind. The Prometheus Rising carried an artificial intelligence that had been designed during humanity's darkest hour. It had been built to fight an enemy that outnumbered humanity thousands to 1. It thought faster than any organic brain. It predicted enemy movements before orders were given. It hacked communication systems and turned ships against each other with invisible precision. "Commander?" Marcus Cole explained it to a captured Venari officer during one engagement. The officer had been brought aboard after his ship was disabled. He sat in the brig, terrified but curious. "Your species thinks of war as numbers," Cole told him. "Ships against ships. Guns against guns. We learn to think differently. When you're facing extinction, you don't fight fair. You fight smart. This ship was designed to defeat fleets 10 times its size. 200 ships?" He almost smiled. "That's a challenge. Not a threat." Captured officer was released unharmed after the battle. He carried Cole's words back to the task force. They spread through the fleet like a virus. feeding the fear that had already taken root. After 3 months, the task force finally cornered the Prometheus Rising in the Ashfall system. It was a dead region of space, filled with the burned-out remnants of ancient stars. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. 200 ships formed a sphere around the lone vessel. Admiral Veronic allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The chase was over. The legend would finally die. He opened a channel to the Prometheus Rising. "Surrender your ship and crew," he commanded. "You have fought well, but this ends now. You are outnumbered and outgunned. There is no escape." Captain Vance's response came through the fleet's communication system. But it was not directed at Vornak. It was broadcast on every frequency, to every ship, to every station. To every planet in the galactic concord, her voice was calm, tired, but beneath the exhaustion was something unbreakable. "You hunt us because you fear what we represent," she said. "You should fear it. 300 years ago, humanity faced extinction. We were outnumbered, outgunned. Every species in this galaxy wanted us dead. We should have lost. We should have died. But we refused." The fleet listened in silence. Even Vornak could not bring himself to interrupt. "We built ships like this one not because we loved war. We built them because we loved life. Every piece of technology on this vessel exists because humans chose survival over surrender. We poured our fear, our rage, our desperate hope into these hulls. We created weapons that could think faster than any enemy. We designed shields that could learn and adapt. We made ourselves into something that could not be conquered." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made strong warriors tremble. "You have spent generations believing you domesticated us. You watched us become peaceful and assumed we had become weak. You were wrong. We domesticated ourselves. We chose to be kind. We chose to be gentle. But the wolves never forgot how to hunt. And you just cornered a wolf." Transmission ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. 200 ships held their positions. One ancient vessel floated at the center of the sphere. Then the Prometheus Rising began to change. Its hull started to glow. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the fleet's sensors could measure. The ship was charging its experimental drive, the same drive that had trapped it in temporal fold space 300 years ago. Voronic understood immediately what was about to happen. "All ships, fire." He screamed. "Fire everything now." But it was too late. The Prometheus Rising entered what would later be called combat fold. It jumped through fold space in microsecond bursts, appearing and disappearing faster than weapons could track. One moment it was in the center of the sphere. The next it was beside a destroyer, its weapons carving through shields and engines before jumping away. The maneuver was theoretically impossible. The energy requirements alone should have torn any ship apart. The navigation calculations required processing power that no computer should possess. But the humans who built the Prometheus Rising had not cared about what was possible. They had only cared about survival. For 20 minutes, the ancient ship danced through the fleet. It struck with terrible precision, disabling weapons and engines, leaving life support intact. It was not trying to kill. It was trying to break them. When the light finally faded, 63 ships were drifting helplessly in space. The rest of the fleet had scattered, fleeing in every direction. Admiral Vornok's flagship was among the disabled. The Prometheus Rising hung motionless in the void. Its hull was torn in dozens of places. Atmosphere vented from wounds that would never heal. The ancient ship had finally reached its limit, but it had done enough across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched recordings of the battle. They saw 200 warships flee from one vessel. They saw technology that defied everything they knew about physics and war. They saw what humanity could become when pushed to the edge, and they were afraid. The Prometheus Rising drifted in the darkness of the Ashfall system. Its great engines were silent. Its weapons were cold. The ship that had survived 300 years and countless battles was finally dying. "Captain." Vance walked through the corridors she had called home for so long. Every step echoed in the empty hallways. The ship's systems were failing one by one. There was nothing her crew could do to stop it. She passed through sections that held memories older than most civilizations. Here was the medical bay where she had held dying friends. There was the engineering deck where her people had worked miracles with broken technology. Every wall, every door, every scratch in the metal told a story of sacrifice and survival. 40-7 people remained, 47 souls who had crossed time itself to reach this moment. They had given everything to protect a humanity they barely recognized. Now they watched their ship fade away. Commander Cole found her standing on the observation deck. The viewport showed the distant glow of the scattered fleet. Dozens of ships still drifted helplessly, their crews alive but humbled. "Rescue ships are coming," Cole reported. "Terran Republic vessels. They'll reach us in 6 hours." Hans nodded slowly. "The ship won't last that long." "I know." Cole stood beside her in silence for a moment. Was it worth it? She considered the question carefully. The Prometheus Rising had been her life. More than her life. It had been her purpose, her burden, her only connection to a world that no longer existed. Watching it die felt like losing a piece of her soul. But she thought of New Antioch. 12 million people who would have died without their intervention. She thought of the Venari homeworld, where billions had learned what it felt like to be helpless. She thought of the message that had spread across the galaxy. "Yes," she said finally. It was worth it. The rescue fleet arrived 4 hours later. Terran Republic ships surrounded the dying dreadnought, transferring crew and recovering what equipment they could. The Prometheus Rising was too damaged to repair. Its time had finally come. Captain Vance was the last person to leave. She stood alone on the bridge, her hand resting on the command chair. 300 years of service, countless battles, impossible victories. All of it ending in the quiet darkness of a forgotten star system. "Thank you," she whispered to the ship. "For everything." Then she walked to the airlock and left the Prometheus Rising for the last time. The Terran. Republic treated Vance and her crew as heroes. They offered parades, monuments, positions of honor in the new military. Politicians wanted to meet them. Historians wanted to interview them. The whole of humanity wanted to celebrate the return of their legendary warriors. Vance refused it all instead. She requested a meeting with Earth's leaders. She sat in a room with admirals and senators and explained what needed to happen next. "The galaxy has not changed as much as you believe," she told them. The Venari were not alone in their plans. Other species watch and wait. They see your peace and mistake it for weakness. The Prometheus Rising reminded them to be afraid. But fear fades. They will test you again. The room was silent. These were people who had grown up in an era of diplomacy and trade. They had never known the desperate wars of humanity's past. "What do you suggest?" the senior admiral asked. Vance leaned forward. "Give us a new ship. Something modern. Something fast. My crew and I will patrol the borders. We will remind the galaxy that humanity's fire still burns. Not through war. Through presence. Through the knowledge that if anyone threatens human lives, we will answer." The request was debated for weeks. Some argued that Vance and her crew were relics of a violent past. Others worried that giving them power would provoke the very conflicts they hoped to prevent. In the end, humanity's leaders remembered New Antioch. They remembered 12 million people who had almost died because no one was willing to protect them. The new ship was called the Prometheus Eternal. It was smaller than its predecessor, but faster, deadlier, and carrying technology that made the original dreadnought look primitive. The Terran Republic had not been idle during their centuries of peace. They had simply kept their weapons hidden. Hoping they would never be needed, Vance stood on the bridge of her new command. It felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Hope, her crew took their stations around her. The same 47 people who had crossed time itself. They were older now, changed by everything they had witnessed. But they were still warriors. They still remembered what it meant to fight for humanity's survival. The ship hummed with power as its systems came online. Through the viewport, Vance could see the stars waiting for them. Somewhere out there, human colonies dotted 100 worlds. Somewhere out there, predators watched and calculated. A message arrived as they prepared to depart. It came from the Surashi ambassador, humanity's oldest ally. "We thought we knew humanity," the message read. "We were wrong." "What are you truly?" Vance smiled slightly as she composed her reply. She thought about her ancestors who had crawled out of caves and learned to make fire. She thought about the generations who had survived ice ages and plagues. She thought about the desperate warriors of the Unification, wars who had built impossible weapons and refused to surrender. "We are the species that looked at the void and decided it was not empty enough," she wrote. "We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day and failed. We are the monsters who chose to become something better, but we never forgot how to be monsters." She paused, considering her final words. "Pray you never make us remember fully." She sent the message and turned to her crew. "Take us out," she ordered. "The galaxy is waiting." The Prometheus Eternal powered forward, accelerating toward the edge of the system. In moments, it would enter fold space and vanish into the void. Across the galaxy, species who had planned to move against humanity quietly changed their plans. Fleets that had been gathering dispersed. Expansion into human territory was canceled. The lesson of the Ashfall system had been learned. Humanity was not weak. They had simply chosen to be kind. But kindness, they now understood, was not the same as helplessness. On Earth, children gathered around screens to watch recordings of the Prometheus Rising's final battle. They saw the ancient ship dance through 200 enemies. They saw it sacrifice itself to protect their species. They heard Captain Vance's words echoing across the stars. The story spread from planet to planet. It grew with each telling. Parents whispered it to their children. Soldiers shared it in barracks. Diplomats referenced it in negotiations. The tale of the ghost ship that saved humanity became a new legend. A reminder of what they had been. A promise of what they could become. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Prometheus Eternal continued its patrol. Its crew watched for threats that might never come. They stood ready for battles they hoped would never happen. But if the galaxy ever forgot the lesson of the Prometheus Rising, they would be there to remind them. They would always be there, because humanity never truly forgot how to survive.